Dude, we are literally in a lifeboat in the middle of the ocean right now. There are people dead in the water. The cruise is over. Hello, welcome back to Therapy for Time Travelers, episode 2. It has been a little bit of time since episode 1. Specifically, it's been about 3 weeks at this point in time, which is significantly longer than I set out with the intentions of doing these videos. But alas, a lot of things happen within my industry that you cannot always pre-plan for. And so that's why I always say that my intentions of making these videos are just that. They're intentions, they are not blood oaths. But nevertheless, we are back today and we are working from a new journal. More specifically, we are working from this journal, which is the Inner Me Journal by no author, just some mysterious wisdom sage. It's a lot shorter, the intro, because I haven't done this journal. Obviously, it's episode 2, and it is a brand new journal. It is one that Dress Levesque, aka my worst enemy for my entire life almost, did give to me, broke into my house to give to me. So it is another one of those journals. It's a very short intro, very, very short intro. It's got this page, and then it just jumps straight into it, which I kind of appreciate because the last journal that we did had like an entire chapter of pre-work. So the prompt that we're doing today is, of course, the first prompt in the journal, and also like literally page 6. Like I said, very, very nice. So the prompt is, what is your idea of adventure, and describe your greatest adventure? Now, this is another one when I first read it, I was like, okay, like we're going to have to skip through that. There is too much to unpack in this. But then I figured that if I keep doing that in journals, it just kind of really defeats the purpose of what I'm trying to achieve here. So we're going to push through it, and we're going to address my idea of adventure. So the topic of today is adventure and what adventure means to me. And that is really quite simple for me to answer. And that is that for me, adventure means survival. And I know for a lot of people out there, adventure means something a lot more positive than that. It means travel or skydiving or hiking the Appalachian Trail. And I'm not saying any of that is bad at all. I actually really, really like the idea of hiking the Appalachian Trail. It's something I'd really love to do. It's something I will probably never do, but I do like it in concept. But for me, adventure is just not a positive thing. It has never been a positive thing in my life. I can't see it becoming a positive thing. Even being here right now on this adventure is not something that I would have done of my own volition if I wasn't being forced into doing it. The point that I'm trying to make is that for a lot of people, most people in fact, when they think of the word adventure, they think of something exciting or just trying something new or, taking a big risk. But for me, adventure is not something that has positive connotations. It is really actually something that's quite negative. In my eyes, adventure has always been about survival. It's about staying alive in the face of whatever it is that the universe decides to throw at you that day. Adventure is not something that you seek. It's something that you avoid at all costs. It's not about chasing the unknown. It's about not allowing the unknown to just consume you. I sure as hell don't go out trying to find adventure, but adventure has a tendency, you may say, of finding me. The one and only time in my entire life that I actually actively went out in search of adventure, if you were to take a pen today and draw it from me right now to that person there, it would be a direct line. And as we all know, I don't want to be here, so that is not a good thing at all. Prior to that, my life was completely unadventurous, unexciting in every single way, and I should have appreciated that more. I should have respected that more. But alas, I did not, and so here I am, and ever since that day that I decided to go find adventure for the first and last time in my entire life. Yes, in my world, adventure is when you find yourself in a situation when you're forced to question everything that you thought you ever knew about reality. It's coming face to face with the unknown and somehow surviving. It's that feeling, that very, very distinct feeling of your heart beating super hard in your chest as you're running for your life, trying to keep your feet on the ground as the universe throws curveballs at you left, right, and center. It's those moments that make you question everything you ever thought was real. Those moments where life just kind of seems to slap you across the face just purely to remind you how fragile and unpredictable it can be. So what is my greatest adventure? To be honest, that is a really difficult question because I have more than a few to pick from. But I guess if I have to tell one, I would tell you one that, looking back now with hindsight and years of being removed from the specific night that it happened, is actually quite a good memory, even though at the time it was completely heinous. I always had a sneaking suspicion through my life that at some point, sooner or later, I would get lost at sea. But I always assumed that it would be because I fell asleep in like a pool inflatable and got drifted out to sea without my knowledge. And my friends just made a big joke of it, thinking, you know, how long would I stay asleep before I noticed? But nope. Turns out that I greatly underestimated the universe's desire to mess with me, because it was not a pool inflatable. It was an actual ocean liner that did the job. And just for the sake of time, we're going to jump over the why and the when and the how and just jump straight into the meaty part of the story, where I am standing on the deck of this ship, watching as the other passengers scramble to get into lifeboats. And already at this point in time, my feet, like my shoes, are wet, because apparently the deck that I'm standing on is quickly turning into the shallow end of a very stupid pool. Because at this point, the bow of the ship is already like leaning at a slight angle, so everyone is running around, screaming, freaking out, because at this point, it's about 10 p.m. at night, and the lights of the ship keep flickering on and off, like unpredictably. So every time they would flicker off, everyone would just start screaming. And then when they'd flicker on, they would calm down a little bit, but not so much. Like the volume would go down a little bit. The chaos would still be exactly the same. So I am standing there trying to keep my cool, which is a lot easier said than done if you consider the fact that I am currently standing on an ocean liner in the middle of the ocean that seems very determined to make itself the latest underwater attraction going around. It did not help that by this point, the alarms had been blaring non-stop for 10 minutes straight. And so everyone, even if there could have been calm, that didn't help the situation. So everyone is running around like headless rats trying to flee a sinking ship. But instead of rats, we're actually, idiotic passengers trying to flee while a sinking ship. Like, that part's true. It was a sinking ship. The point is that me and my husband, we were not in a very good position. And it was so loud that you pretty much had to scream to communicate with one another. So I was like screaming over the chaos, like, dude, we seriously need to get on a lifeboat like 5 minutes ago. And despite all the chaos going on around us, my husband does not seem even slightly a bit concerned about what's happening. He's leaning against the railing of the deck, and he's got a martini glass in his hand. Actually, no, it was not a martini. It was a cosmopolitan, like, cocktail, complete with a flamingo-shaped straw, because a martini would have been way too classy of a drink for this shit show. The point that I'm trying to make is that he did not look even slightly concerned about all the chaos that is happening around us. Like, he did not look like he was facing a possible impending, like, watery death. He looked like he was just waiting for happy hour to begin. I think the most concern that he even showed during this point in time was asking me if it was bad luck to get drunk on a sinking ship, like bad juju or something. And all around us, like literally everyone else in our vicinity, they're pushing one another, they're screaming, they're crying, they're fighting one another to get onto these lifeboats. But not us, no. No, not us. We're just standing there watching all this chaos unfold like it's a really bad episode of some shitty sitcom or something. So finally, after about 10 minutes of this, my husband finally turns to me, and with all the urgency of asking me, when is brunch? He asked me, what's the plan? And I'm like, what's the plan? The plan is to not drown. And at this, my husband just nods his head as if I've just said the most logical, solid proof plan imaginable on this entire ship. And he takes another sip of the Cosmopolitan. And then he turns to me again and he goes, very seriously, very, very seriously goes, you know what, Casey? I think this might actually be the best Cosmopolitan I've ever tasted in my entire life. And I'm like, amazing, like fantastic. I'm so happy that you're having a good time right now. And he's like, I actually think they used real lime juice. I'm like, super. And he's like, and real cranberries. Amazing. And he's like, and if they said that it was organic, I would absolutely believe them. So at this, I just completely block out his voice and I block out all the chaos going on around us, because it's becoming very, very apparent that if I don't do something and do something very quick, we are literally going to fucking die out here. So I'm looking around trying to come up with a plan, and I realize that there is a lifeboat a little bit up the deck from us, and it's like kind of at a precarious angle, like different from the other ones, like it's kind of been prematurely dropped. And it was still absolutely chaos. Like people were pushing past one another, like fighting one another to go to this lifeboat and look at it. But despite the fact that it wasn't even, like there was still space in it, they weren't getting into it because I guess they were a bit scared because of the angle it's at. So one, you had to actually like, it was a huge step, almost like a leap to get into it. But also, I guess people were scared that because it had dropped at such a precarious angle that it wasn't safe. So a lot of people were hesitating before getting onto it. Most people weren't getting onto it. And it was like, okay, so that's probably the lifeboat that we need to be moving towards. But even like with all that said, it was still absolute chaos out there. Like there was no organization, there was no structure, there was nothing. It was like every man and dog for themselves. So I'm looking at this lifeboat and I'm like, we need to be going on this lifeboat. So I point at it and I turn to P. I'm like, I think we need to be heading in that direction. And as I'm speaking, he's looking over the railing into the water as if he's, you know, contemplating going for a nice leisurely swim in the middle of the night in the ice cold water. But when I finish speaking, he turns back to me and he looks dead serious. He's looking in my eyes, and it's the first real serious look that I've seen from him the entire journey of where, to be honest. And he goes, do you think they have drinks on the lifeboats? And I'm like, I'm going to assume no. And I absolutely cannot deal with this at this point. So I grab him by the arm and I start dragging him towards the lifeboat. And his first instinct is to protect the cosmopolitan. So he holds it up over his head like it's friggin' Simba in the circle of life. And I have to admit here, okay? I have to admit, it was actually quite impressive because I don't think he spilt a single drop of the cosmopolitan in the fighting, bustling, screaming, panicked crowd. Like, it was pretty impressive. So we're weaving our way finally through the panicked crowd. And I know that if you're listening to this, you probably think that P sounds like an alcoholic, insane person, but he was not the only one with like those kind of inclinations. Like the very smart passengers, of which in hindsight, I would like to believe that I was, but I wasn't that smart. They already had life jackets on, but for a lot of the others, like a lot of them were like carrying their belongings like on the deck, trying to drag them along. I even saw like one man and he had his like huge and giant trunk like on his shoulders, dragging it on his back like a turtle shell. And I'm like, sure, buddy, like you carry that luggage. Like that is not going to prevent you from drowning. Like that's not going to help you not drown at all. At this point, the ship is legitimately moaning, and the more that we like walk up the deck, the more I swear I can feel it like tilting even more. And even over all the screaming and the crying and all the noise, you could actually hear the water like rushing into the ship. Like the whole thing was just not very promising at all. And P, who at this point is still walking around with the friggin' cosmopolitan held over his head in between taking miniature sips, he like looks down at me and he's like, do you know what this situation reminds me of? And I was like, do not say it. But he said it anyway. He was like, the Titanic. And I'm like, no, this is nothing like the Titanic, okay? The only similarities between our situation and the Titanic is that we're all going to die in ice cold, shark-infested waters, and there's nothing we can do about it. And he's like, do you want to be my Kate Winslet? And I was like, absolutely not. At this point, we finally get to the lifeboat and there's a huge crowd around it. And there are a couple of crew members like trying to organize everyone and everything, but everyone, like it's still chaos. It's completely chaos. People are pushing, people are shoving, people are like fighting with one another. And there is one crew member, like a young man, who's like sitting in the actual lifeboat itself, and he's sweating bullets. And he finally calls out, he's like, 2 more people, we can take 2 more people on this lifeboat. Upon hearing this, P finally takes an inch of initiative, and he scoots me up in one arm, and he's cradling the Cosmopolitan with the other. And he's a really, really big guy. He's like 6'5". So he has no trouble like pushing his way to the front. So we get to the front, and we're about to get onto the boat, but P pauses and he looks at the guy who's sitting in the boat, and he holds up the half-empty Cosmopolitan, and he goes, "Can I bring this with me?" And the guy in the boat is like, yeah, sure, I guess, like, just get in the damn boat. To get into the lifeboat, and it is almost overcrowded at this point. I don't think it was overcrowded, but it was like you could not possibly fit another person in it. But we managed to, move some single people around, and we managed to sit together. And P sitting there just cradling his Cosmopolitan like his precious family heirloom or something. At this point, because the lifeboat is filled to absolute maximum capacity, the crew start lowering us down. And again, this lifeboat is at a really weird angle. So as they're lowering us, it starts like swaying really scared. It was really bad. And people are screaming and crying, and like, it was a really bad situation. And I'm clutching the side of the lifeboat like, holy shit, like, this is actually legitimately scary. But not for P. P is still just sitting there clutching the freaking Cosmopolitan. And he's sitting there like he's in a day spa or something. So we finally touch down in the water. And from this angle, we can see that this ship is sinking a lot faster than we initially thought. So it was a really good thing that we got onto this lifeboat. And it was a really bad situation. Like, the entire bow was like pretty much already submerged in water, and the lights were still flickering on and off like even quicker, and people were screaming, and you could, even from in the water, you could hear the water like rushing into the ship, and people were screaming and, calling for help and waving as if, waving would do anything to change the situation that they were in. We start drifting away. And at this point in time, everyone on our little boat, except for P and me, they're either crying or they're praying or they're just staring off blankly into the distance. And it was so sad. Like, it was really, really sad, because the man sitting directly across from us, he had a photo album, and he was like clutching it to his chest like it was his ticket to salvation. And then the lady next to him, she had like a little chihuahua in her lap, and it was so terrified that it would not stop barking. And I love dogs so much, but in that specific moment, like, I hated that dog so much. Like, I actually wanted to throw it overboard, and that sounds so horrible, but that's how much I hated that dog in that moment. And as people are like praying and crying around us, P leans over and he whispers into my ear. He's like, "Do you think they will give us a refund?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "For the cruise, it was really expensive, and I don't feel like we got our money's worth." And I'm like, dude, we are literally in a lifeboat in the middle of the ocean right now. There are people dead in the water. The cruise is over. Yeah, that was how our cruise ended. Not with the relaxing voyage that I was promised going into it, but with a sinking ship and a questionable lifeboat and an odd protectiveness of some random Cosmopolitan that in the end just got thrown overboard, because I got really annoyed of it. But as good as that story is, and it is one of my favorites, like, it's one of the stories that, looking back, I actually can laugh at and think, wow, that was crazy. In hindsight, at the time, like I said in the beginning, it was really, really heinous. It was a horrible experience at the time. But looking back, especially compared to other things, it's one of the adventures that, I look back at and I say, things could have been worse. We could have been stuck on a door in the middle of the ocean with one of us freezing to death, which it would have been P. I would have been on the door. Actually, I think it was a fireplace. I don't know. But yeah, point is, that pretty much sums up what adventure means to me. Even if looking back now, I can laugh at it. It was really horrific at the time, and it's actually a very horrific memory, full stop. But the story, it really does sum up what adventure is to me, which is staring into the unknown, not knowing if you're going to make it out alive or not. It's coming face to face with things you can't explain with only your instincts to rely upon. Adventure isn't a choice. It finds you whether or not you're ready for it. And if you're anything like me, you've found out pretty quickly over the years that the best way to go about dealing with it is just to hold on as tightly as you can and hope that you can get to the other side unscathed. Because when adventure calls, you don't always have the privilege of saying no. Adventure means survival. It means feeling the fear deep inside, but pushing through it anyway. Because really, I feel like the biggest lesson that adventure can teach us, whether you enjoy it or you're like me and you despise it, is that more often than not, the greatest adventure, the greatest fear, the greatest tragedy of all is not out there in the world. It's right here in your mind.